You need to watch and explain all of Marvel's Moon Knight show, or I'm gonna take control of your body and throw you off a cliff.
What? Why?
Because we're trying to do better with, timely search results.
Well, count me out.
That should stop me from having to explain Moon Knight.
Yeah. Anyway. All right, so we open with a Bob Dylan needle drop, warbling over some close-ups of hands and ancient Egyptian-looking cloth and shit. There's also a modern-looking glass of water, which gets some nasty fingers dipped into it, and apparently those nasty fingers are attached to a very silly man because he plays the glass like those weirdos you find in train stations. And even sillier, he chugs the water, smashes the glass with a cane, and then pours the glass into what can only be described as ancient Crocs, which he then slips onto his feet. Presumably, this is an elaborate metaphor linking literal physical pain to the emotional and psychological pain of wearing Crocs. We then get the real Marvel title card, as opposed to Sony's shitty in association one that you'll see about 12 seconds before you walk out of Morbius this weekend. And then we get another needle drop by a guy Google seems to be saying is named Humperdick, which is distressing because that's what everybody used to call me on campus. But anyway, Humperdick croons over a sleepy Oscar Isaac, who wakes up in a bed surrounded by sand and with a Rubik's Cube on the nightstand. Also, he is chained to a post. Can you really believe men live in apartments like this and don't see any issue? He also pulls duct tape off the door because realistically, that tape is nowhere near strong enough to keep out an intruder, no matter how hampered they are by glass Crocs. Dude, they should reboot Cinderella with glass Crocs instead of slippers.
Get in, loser. We're getting you a pair of Crocs. Let's go.
Then Oscar talks to his fish with what can only be described as the most British accent.
Morning, Gus, my little one-finned wonder.
And then heads outside to be a dick to a janitor for no reason.
Hey, mate, still selling the old brushes and brooms, right? Right in front of my entrance. Got no problem with it.
Anyway, Oscar rides the bus to work, or as they say in England, slaloms the lollywagon to the jobby, and is immediately yelled at for talking to a kid about the pyramids rather than doing his actual job, which is selling gift shop pyramids to kids. Over and over, his boss tells him he's not allowed to be a tour guide despite knowing a ton about Egyptian history. But why? Is Egyptian History Museum tour guide really that esteemed a position? Do they get a lot of applicants from PhDs? On average, UK tour guides make about £20,000 a year, which, I mean, for all I know, could be $1 billion or like 8 cents. I don't know metric.
Don't even know what this has to do with Egypt, really.
Yeah, anyway, but we also learned that his name is
Stevie.
Stephen, actually, I am
John C. And he apparently has a date with some hot lady in a couple days, even though he doesn't at all remember asking her out, because if you look like Oscar Isaac, you can literally get women in your sleep.
Are you asking me out?
And apparently they're supposed to go get steaks, but Steven's boss points out that he's a vegan, which of course means that he'll spontaneously combust into a pile of broccoli if he so much as smells a cow. This is presumably the central conflict of this series. After work, Steven catches up with his good friend, the living statue, and he reveals that he's been wandering around at night, which is presumably why he chains himself to his bed and puts duct tape on the door and sand on the ground so he can tell if he escapes at night. Feels like it'd be way easier to just purchase a nanny cam or something, but whatever. He does hope he can eventually ditch that ankle restraint, as it might be a red flag to his new potential girlfriend, but if she's the right woman, she'll actually be super into that kind of thing.
Is that so wrong?
Stevie, you absolute rascal.
The living statue says nothing because he's a goddamned professional. Then Steven heads home and listens to an audiobook about how to stay awake, but he also tries reading a bunch of books on ancient Egypt, which is almost certainly the best way to not stay awake. But he is a very active reader in that he highlights the subheader of pages, which seems unnecessary. Highlight the passages, dummy. That's like highlighting the front cover of Fight Club. I'm gonna want to remember this Fight Club thing later. Unsurprisingly, he does still fall asleep, and he wakes up in a daytime grassy field with his jaw all sorts of up. He sort of cracks it back into place and hears a disembodied voice call him an idiot and demand he give control of his body to Mark, which is really similar to an audio recording I play in my bedroom whenever a lady friend visits. Yeah, I tell everybody I'm named Mark. It keeps things simple. Steven realizes he's got a golden scarab beetle thing in his pocket, and a bunch of British dudes with guns start shooting at him, which is very surprising because their gun laws are very strict over there. The basic cops don't even usually carry guns. Whatever, Steven runs to a nearby village where he stumbles on some sort of judgment ritual. A guy named Arthur, played by a homeless Ethan Hawke, asks a crowd of people if any of them would like to be judged. One dude says, sure. So Arthur pulls the man's hands together, forces him to cradle a swinging cane thing while Arthur's tattoo wiggles, and somehow judges the man's sins, and presumably, if he's deemed unworthy, the cane will swing up into his balls, killing him. Thankfully, he's considered a good man. Then some old lady goes up there, and Arthur's tattoo turns red, which I guess means she's been judged to be evil, but she's like, hey, I'm a good lady, though, and Arthur's like, I don't doubt it, but I guess you're gonna be evil at some point in the future, so she keels over and dies. Not to question their religion, but why go up there to be judged if it might kill you? The guy who didn't die doesn't, like, grow wings or a kick-ass mustache or anything. I think I'd wait for a bit if it were me. Especially if I'm going to be judged for people I haven't even murdered yet. At least let me have the satisfaction of murdering them before I get all judged. Arthur realizes Stephen is in the crowd and demands the gold bug from him. Stephen says, sure, I don't care. But when he tries to hand it over, his body fights him. Then he blacks out and kills everybody, and we've all been there. All right. Stephen doesn't know what's going on, but like anybody struggling to piece together their life, he steals a cupcake van, even though he doesn't have a license. He's chased by the armed limeys and almost slams into a truck full of cocks. It's chickens, don't worry.
Eat up, ladies.
There's yet another classic needle drop, and are all these cars American or at least non-British? The steering wheel is on the left. That's weird. Then this asshole jumps onto the truck and starts smashing cupcakes like my drunk uncle on my 7th birthday, but it's all good because Stephen blacks out again and murders him. Wish Stephen had blacked out at my 7th birthday. Then fully conscious, license-free Stephen pulls an absolutely insane cupcake van dodge maneuver and then blacks out and realizes he's driving backwards, but I'm not sure why he needs to keep blacking out if the fully conscious version can apparently drive circles around the Fast and Furious gang while in a cupcake van. Whatever, Stephen's about to get shot, but then the bad guys get Lignum Ex Machina. Lignum Ex Machina.
Linea ex machina.
Then Steve wakes up in bed, fully chained, and determines it all must have been a wacky dream of cupcakes and cocks.
Somnium Cooper cakes et galli.
He looks at his fish and wonders if fish dream of electric sheep, but before he follows that through to its conclusion, he notices that its fin has grown back despite being all Nemo looking the day before. He takes it to a store to tell a clerk this, but they don't care, and nobody cares because then Stephen remembers his date anyway, so he goes to the steak store, but is stood up by the pretty lady. He calls her to ask what's up, and she says she was at the restaurant 2 days ago. Apparently, Stephen has lost 2 whole days of his life eating cupcakes, which is so far the most relatable aspect of his character. Aww. Stephen is so distraught over this, he orders a steak, but since he's a vegan, he's apparently never even heard of steak. He just orders
The best bit of the steak.
and doesn't comprehend that it can be cooked to various levels of doneness because vegans are stupid. Then Stephen walks through the streets and calls his mom, which is something he also did at the beginning of the episode, and I'm wondering if his mother is in fact real. He never appears to hear a response to anything he says, but to be fair, he keeps saying
Gators, gators.
so how are you going to respond to that? Anyway, Stephen gets home and munches on the chocolate he'd bought for his date, and he feeds his no longer gimpy fish some sprinkles, which will probably kill it.
I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead. I died, I'm dead.
And then he discovers a hidden compartment in his wall with some keys and a sick-ass razor phone from when I was in high school. That dude is about to slowly text some spicy-ass messages. The phone has a bajillion calls to somebody named Layla, but before Stephen can call her, she calls him. And the phone loudly rings, which is interesting because she says that she's been trying to call him for months, but if his phone audibly rings, how has Stephen never heard it before?
Yeah.
Even more confusingly, Layla believes Stephen is named Mark, which, again, is probably just his sex alias. This is further confirmed by her being like, what are you doing with that weird accent? And lady, that is a great question that we are all wondering the answer to. Then she hangs up. And then Stephen in the streets, Mark in the sheets, hears a disembodied voice again, and everything starts shaking like an earthquake, and Stephen does the sensible thing and immediately runs to the elevator. You know, the safest place to wait out an earthquake. Thankfully, it's more of a brain quake, and everything seems to be actually fine, other than, I guess, Stephen's glimpse of a horrifying floating bird mummy man demon, which turns into a less horrifying woman, though, so it's fine. Then Stephen wakes up again on a bus, a lollywagon, and it turns out that Arthur is also on the lollywagon, but I'm gonna guess that he's not just there to slalom to his in-town jobby. Stephen runs into the museum and is soon confronted by Arthur, who drops a little exposition on him, beginning with the reveal that many of the museum staff are also secret cultists. Like all museums. Because the liberals, I don't know, Aren't museums considered liberal, probably? So apparently the doodlebug belongs to Amet, an ancient Egyptian god who operated basically like prehistory pre-crime and would preemptively judge people for their sins before they ever had a chance to enact them. Arthur claims that she would have stopped Hitler, Pol Pot, and presumably Chris Rock and or Will Smith and or Jada Pinkett Smith and or Gary the teleprompter operator, depending on who you think is the villain here. But unfortunately for the Academy Awards, the other Egyptian gods conspired against Amet to keep her from Tom Cruising everybody before they could do their crime. So 9/11 was the fault of selfish Egyptian gods, if you're keeping score at home. Also, Arthur reveals he knows about the voice Stephen keeps hearing, and he somehow convinces Stephen to do a quick testicle judgment session. Fortunately, Stephen passes, maybe? We don't actually see what the wiggly tattoo does, but Arthur says that Stephen has a lot of chaos in him. Then Stephen runs away and they let him go.
Let him go.
And now it's nighttime, or moon nighttime, even. And Stephen's forced to take inventory as punishment for being late to work a bunch, but isn't he the gift shop guy? Shouldn't that just always be his job? I don't know, but Stephen thinks he hears a dog loose in the museum, and he's not wrong, but he's also not right. But before this evil dog thing can eat him and return the little golden insect calf to Arthur, Stephen hides in the bathroom. And that's when Mark decides to finally make himself known. Mark appears in the mirror, sporting an American accent, and tells Stephen he really needs to let him take over so they can kill this dog thing and move on with their lives. And that's how you know that this show is horror influenced. Horror movies freaking hate dogs. Brief pause. Speaking of sex aliases, I suppose we're supposed to believe the Mark version of Stephen asked out that lady from the museum, but then why would Mark stand her up? And would that woman also not be confounded by Mark's American accent or the fact that he says his name is Mark? Or is Mark pretending to be Stephen just so Stephen could get a date for no reason? Was he trying to be helpful? I don't know, it doesn't matter. Egyptian hieroglyphics start appearing on all the walls and Stephen succumbs to Mark's sweet persistence, and I guess he/they transform into a sandy-looking mummy druid superhero thing that, beats the shit out of that dog. Take that, dog! And that's it. Guess I'll let Jordan drive for another week.